Pull up, grab the fuel nozzle, and get ready to fuel up on trends and strategies to grow your travel center business in this episode of The Truck Stops Here, brought to you by NATSO. Now, here are your hosts, Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.
Welcome to this episode of The Truck Stops Here. Today, I have a special guest, from NATSO, Darren Schulte.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Darren. We're going to talk about biodiesel today. Who do you think we should talk to?
Well, it has to be the one and only world famous. In fact, I mean world famous. He was in London, not physically, but popped up on my screen all over the place when I was on the internet. Jeff Hove.
All right. So, Jeff, we have you special in from Iowa. Can you tell folks a little bit about you and your background?
That sounds great. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the intro, Darren. Was not expecting the world renown. I've been working with fuel position holders and retailers for about the past 20 years. Really began in the compliance arena, and because I've done so much work in the Midwest, obviously renewable fuels and alternative fuels were always kind of front and center. So I've been working with retailers and blenders to help them bring in incentives and increase their fuel margins for the last number of years.
Jeff, I know a lot of our members really appreciate it.
So the reason I have Darren here today, as well as Jeff, is that Darren gets a lot of questions from NATSO members just on the very basics of biodiesel. And I thought, these are the best two people to talk about it. So we're going to dive into our questions. The first one is, how do I go about blending biodiesel? I think a lot of people, for people who aren't doing it at all.
So there's a number of things. What NATSO's Alternative Fuels Council does is we spend a lot of time with industry on some one-on-one time, get to know their companies, what their goals are over the next 12 months, 5 years, 10 years. And we really try to get to know their companies. And when we start talking about, we'll say biodiesel, for example, we start looking at regionally, what do they have access to for biodiesel? And then what infrastructure do they need? Do they need any additional infrastructure? And then how do they maintain their compliance and their fuel quality while they're offering the biodiesel or ethanol or renewable CNG, all the above.
Hey, Jeff, can a single store operator benefit from biodiesel, just as an example?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, coming from with my NATSO hat on, we all know how much a travel center can move when it comes to volume on a per monthly basis. So those economics really add up even for a single store operator, probably more so than a regular C-store.
Wow. So Jeff, if I don't have the financial resources to put in equipment, how would I participate in this biodiesel model? I mean, what are ways I could get biodiesel to my store if I wasn't, if I didn't have the money to put in a tank or something like that? Sure.
So number one, all the equipment you have on site right now is compatible up to B20. So you do not have any compatibility issues on site right now.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and even in California, they're changing their rules come January 1st, which is very, very important, that they're gonna treat up to B20 the same as our ULSD, our distillate. So if you do not want to invest a lot, we have clients today that are blending in tank or they're blending in transport, and then of course we have others that are putting in additional tank and maybe an inline blending system of sorts, so that
Jeff,
they're blending that way.
Could you explain the difference between blending in tank and blending in the delivery process? Again, if I'm new to this business, what's the difference between those two?
Sure. So probably the biggest difference is what you're bringing to the location. If you want to bring a transport load, a full transport load, B100 to the location, and because that improves your economics, then you can do that, and you can basically inline blend with your diesel. So as you're dropping your diesel fuel, you're also dropping your biodiesel, and you're relying on that mixing activity. So the mixing activity is what's very important here. If you're going to blend in the transport, a lot of folks will pick up a certain percent of their transport load with B100 or straight biodiesel, and then put their ULSD on top of that. So of course it depends if you're bottom loading or top loading. And that activity of just filling the transport, going down the road, then dumping into the underground storage tank, is typically more than enough blending and mixing to maintain your fuel quality.
Is there money to be made in that type of blending? Like, again, as I referenced, if I don't have the money to involve in getting a new tank and so forth, can I make money? And approximately, I know nothing is written in steel, but what approximate kind of financial benefits could I get if I blended in the transport?
So if you blended in the transport and you really wanted to keep your ROI low and your infrastructure and your capital costs low, from when we run the numbers. And we run the numbers in multiple different states that also have additional incentives. So number one, that's probably the most important thing to look at is, we understand we've got the EPA's RIN credit incentive. We also have to look at what do other states incentives call out for or give to our industry.
What are those states, if you don't mind me interrupting?
Texas, for example, there is no state fuels excise tax on the B100 portion. Illinois has their sales tax is exempt on the fuel. Iowa has incentives. Where Oregon and California have their low carbon fuel standard, which have been hugely successful for retailers on the West Coast. And we're seeing more and more of those types of low carbon fuel, clean fuel programs start to come up in policy discussions. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of those regional and state incentives as they come up. So that's just to name a few.
Cool. Fantastic.
All right. Okay. So we get a lot of questions about like equipment and pumps and pump notifications. Do they need special pumps?
When we start talking about ethanol blending and mid-level ethanol blending, which a number of our clients are in that boat, even our clients that are unbranded and they're able to blend their own 10% ethanol. Most of your equipment, your retail equipment, is rated up to 10%, possibly up to 15%. But when you get above that and you're an ethanol blender, you really have to get in touch with your equipment supply company and work with them to make sure that your equipment is compatible. Again, your biodiesel is compatible up to B20, and I think that's why we're so positive about what we can do with biodiesel in our industry over the next several years. We've got a lot of room to grow that offering, that fuel offering. Ethanol has got a number of other roadblocks that we're working with, but from an equipment standpoint, that's the gist of it. Up to B20, we're fine. Above E10, we better be calling our equipment providers and making sure that we've got compatible equipment and that our equipment is insurable, right? Because we want to make sure we maintain that financial responsibility and that insurability on our equipment.
Okay. We get a lot of questions on whether truck drivers complain about biodiesel.
Sure. I think as truck drivers, are sitting around having a cup of coffee, it's very easy to push biodiesel aside as a subpar fuel. I think when you really look at the details, though, when you handle biodiesel correctly and you see the increase in cetane, the decrease in emissions, and increase in lubricity of the fuel, there are a lot of upsides to biodiesel. The biggest one, of course, over time is going to be price. Eventually, we will talk about not wanting to have biodiesel going through our engines, but at the end of the day, the price of fuel is a huge line item on most people's budget. And if you can shave some pennies off per gallon by utilizing biodiesel, over time, we're going to see more and more adoption thereof, I believe.
That makes good sense to me. We see that in the stores. We have drivers having some potential issues with it. However, price matters. And you see those drivers moving to places that sell lower price fuel. So that's absolutely true. I've got a quick question. Why you kind of reference other alternative fuels. You reference ethanol. But what other alternative fuel opportunities are there out there for our members? And I also mean maybe even EV. I mean, what opportunities are out there for members? And I know it depends on state by state, but could you speak to that? Some of these other potential alternative fuel opportunities that might be out there for members to increase some additional profitability for their locations?
Sure. And so as we're getting to know the company that we're working with, our first question is always, who is your customer? What are you being asked to sell? Because if you're not being asked to sell CNG, then it's not even on your radar. If you're not being asked to have a DC fast charging system in place, maybe that's lower on the list on what you want to
Jeff,
put into your location.
Not to be rude and interrupt you while you're speaking there, but do you think members might want to consider, even though potentially they don't have that particular customer base today, that they may, like for example, maybe a travel center in a port area, they're building a brand new one, should they maybe consider at least piping or preparing for EV or CNG or LNG or something like that?
Oh, 100%. Yes, of course. And I think if you're involved, and the port authorities are a great place to look at what they're doing on their emissions in their region. And the electrification progress is going to continue. I think it's going to occur more rapidly than what we think, and especially in those types of locations. So, if you're doing a new ground up build, you want to make sure that you have the infrastructure ready to quickly put in DC fast charging or some other charging infrastructure. So, keep that in mind. If you're breaking concrete for utilities, for whatever reason, be prepared to make that offering out there. That's very, very smart.
Cool. We hear a lot about folks saying that they can't sell, B20 or biodiesel at all during the winter. Is that a factual statement that you can't sell biodiesel at all during the winter?
No, I don't. I think it's been pretty well proven that we're still running B11 year round in Illinois and Iowa, Minnesota. I mean, some of the coldest states in the country. You want to be smart about how you're handling it, because it is a different fuel. Your additive package is going to be slightly different when you're working and blending with biodiesel. But today is very commonplace. I mean, people are not stopping the blending of biodiesel. We've got clients in upstate New York that blend throughout the winter. And it's really on making sure that your fuel temperatures are at the right degree when at the point of blending, and then maintaining your equipment and your additive packages. So it's very possible. You
reference additives, and I know a lot of drivers really enjoy adding off-shelf additives to their fuel, such as Power Service or Howes or Lucas and things like that. And here on the street, a lot of times that you can't add those additives, or they don't make a difference with biodiesel. Is there any truth to that as well? I mean, if I'm using subbing at a travel center that's selling B20 blended biodiesel, can I still add additives, my own additives to that to help improve the performance of my vehicle?
Well, if the retailer is doing their job, then they've already gotten their cold flow improver additives in there with that B20 fuel. And it's my understanding that we're kind of known for over additizing. And when you get to a certain point, you're absolutely correct. It does not do anything additional to the fuel.
And so it doesn't hurt it, in other words. If I'm using like today I do straight diesel and I like to add my power service for it, just as an example. If I start using B20 in my truck, it doesn't hurt it. In other words, I can still add additive if that's what is my preferred choice.
Sure. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Did we talk about grants? Are there a lot of grants out there for folks who want to add biodiesel?
We have on our website, here's our plug for our website, is natsoaltfuels.com. And on our website, we have some additional information on there. And it's a really good link that covers every state in the country on what other, whether it's infrastructure grants or other grants. And you'll see how the grants today are really focusing more on electric vehicle supply equipment or things of that nature, right? Because it's the policies that are pushing the newer transportation fuels. But a number of states do have additional grants there. So that's probably the best place to start. If you look at that list, keep in mind that states have grant programs and sometimes the funding runs out. So you can see it on a website and just make sure you're contacting the right people at that agency to make sure that money is actually there.
Okay. All right. So we're going to transition to a segment in a second. But before that, can you just tell us a little bit about Alternative Fuels Council and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So our staff has been working with blenders since 2007. And at the core of our program is a software application that allows any size blender. So it could be that single store operator, it could be a very large chain, to come in and use the software application to manage their RIN credits or to manage an IRS biodiesel blender's tax credit if one is in place, or any other type of incentive program. You can manage those incentives with this application. And then we also do the compliance reporting to the EPA. We do all of the quarterly reporting, we do the annual audit. And then if you would like, we've got buyers for those RINs lined up so that if you want an offtake agreement or if you want a easy way to sell and monetize those RINs, liquidate them, then we can do that for you as well. And it's really all about making it as easy as possible for our industry to take advantage of these incentives, because it's really come to, you're either in an area where you're trying to increase your margin, or you're in an area that is ultra competitive and you're trying to compete, at the price at the curb. And you really need every one of those little incentive variables to do that these days. So we're trying to make sure that it's as easy as possible for our industry to jump in and do that. And in doing that, it's bringing on more alternative fuels, whether it's, and everything we've talked about so far typically has a credit. That's biodiesel, ethanol, renewable CNG, electric vehicles, mostly on the West Coast. But tremendous incentives, and we're gonna see more and more of that policy directive carrot approach, that incentive approach, as opposed to the mandates with the stick. And so our industry needs to be vigilant. We need to keep an eye on that, and that's my job, to make sure industry understands that.
Okay, you ready for my fast fill questions?
Oh, okay.
Okay, what is your go-to on the road snack?
My go-to on the road snack, there is a C-store that offers hot Italian meatball hoagie, and that's my major sin right there.
Okay, you're stuck at a truck stop in a snowstorm. How do you pass the time?
whip open my laptop and get some work done.
Okay. Do you like to drive or do you like to be the passenger?
I like to drive.
Okay.
I love driving.
How do you take your truck stop coffee?
Black.
Black. Okay. And this one is a controversial question. Is it truck stop, travel center, or travel plaza?
I use Travel Center a lot.
Travel center. Okay, that's it.
All right.
Ride or die.
This was fun.
Thank you for listening. Thanks for joining us, Jeff. Can you tell people how to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. You can email me at jhove@natsoaltfuels.com, or you can call me at 515-250-2966.
All right.
Anytime.
Awesome. Well, learn more about NATSO at natso.com. Listen to more of our shows at the truckstopshere.show. Thanks, Darren.
You're welcome, Amy. Peace out.
The Truck Stops Here was brought to you by NATSO, the association representing truck stops and travel centers. Visit natso.com for more information. The Truck Stops Here is produced by NATSO in collaboration with Human Factor. Producers are Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.